No, we should be good to go.
All right. So are we ready?
Yes. Are you ready?
All right, cool. Let's do it. So I'm Ed Wilson, sometimes known as the scripting guy, and this is my wife up here, the scripting wife. And it works out good that way.
And forget my name that way.
Yeah, she's a PowerShell MVP, and she was talking with Klaus, I guess, and maybe some other people to help to organize this event. And so I've been to Denmark several times, and I think the first time that I came to Copenhagen, I had just written my first book on PowerShell. And I do not think the book was even in print yet. It was like the second PowerShell workshop that I had done. It was still back down at the near Tuborg. So I remember that, by the way. And so we had a nice group at the Microsoft office there, and then came back several times. And so we always enjoy coming here. And so whenever we're in the neighborhood, so to speak, we usually try to make it over here. And so I'm on the OMS team, the Operations Management Suite team, which happened about 9 months ago that I switched over. And my boss, Jeremy Winter, is still, wants me to still keep doing the scripting guy stuff. So we still have the Hey Scripting Guy blog, and but PowerShell is now on the OMS team as well. And so this works out really good for me because it gives something new to work with. So OMS is Operations Management Suite, is used to manage our cloud offerings, stuff in Azure in the cloud, but also to manage things which are on premises. And so we can do hybrid management. We can work with Windows in the cloud on Azure. We can work with stuff that is on AWS, Amazon Web Services. We can manage Linux in the cloud or on the premises. We can manage Windows, which is on the premises, or stuff which is in Hyper-V on premises. And the combinations begin to get really mind-boggling. And we are even doing stuff like, because we can bring in the syslog, from Linux machines, or it can run syslog on a Linux machine, and we can collect the logs from routers, your Cisco routers, your networking switches, anything that can do syslog can come up there, and then we can pick up the logs and bring them up. But not only that, we can also even pick up SNMP traps and bring them into analytics and stuff. SNMP 1, 2, or 3, whatever. And so we have the ability then to collect logs, custom logs, or Windows logs, or performance logs, security logs. And because we can collect these, then we can analyze them, and I can create an alert. And if this alert meets a condition, then it will trigger. And then when it triggers, then I can run a PowerShell script or something else. And so what we're going to talk about is how we can do the automation, in the cloud, PowerShell, of course, and how I can use this to configure my machines, wherever they may be, to respond to alerts and other tasks and stuff. And I'm also going to talk about desired state configuration. And how many of you are using or doing desired state configuration DSC? Just maybe about half of you. Okay, so I'm going to talk about that in both a traditional Windows PowerShell environment. But then I'm also going to talk a little bit about how Azure Automation, OMS, can help to make a lot of things more simple. So I'm going to give an overview of Azure Automation, and I might say Azure Automation, or I might say OMS, Operations Management Suite, because OMS, the suite part, is actually made up of 4 different products, if you will. Azure Automation, log analytics, security, configuration, and backup and recovery. These are the 4 main areas. And because we are a cloud service, we are also adding stuff on a regular basis. Sometimes, like every week, we release new stuff. And so in January, I started a blog that primarily, about 3/4 of the articles are written by program managers who are actually on the OMS team as they talk about these new features. So with Azure Automation, then we can begin to have this idea of Windows PowerShell as a service. So in the past, what I would do with Windows PowerShell is I would have to write some scripts, and sometimes those scripts would be quite long and quite complicated. And then I would have to decide, okay, now how can I run these scripts against, these 1,000 remote machines? And so then I have to begin to think, well, how can I do this? Well, because I need credentials that are going to give me the ability to run the script on the remote machine. I may need to share some variables that would be available on these remote machines. I might want to schedule this script to run on these remote machines. And I might need certificates because maybe I have encrypted the script. And so if I start to think about these pieces and how I put them together, then it can become quite complicated. And one of the most common questions that I have received in 15 years, starting out with VB Script, is how can I supply credentials to my scripts? It's really easy when you are sitting on a small network and you are logged on as administrator and you run your script, and we do pass-through authentication. Which means that the password for the administrator is the same on all of the machines. It works really nice, until your machine gets infected with a virus, and then every machine on the network's infected. So that's not so good. But that is easy, and that's usually what we see in all of the examples. Okay, but I need to figure out a different way. Well, one of the ways was, well, let's create another user account in Active Directory on the network, and we will set its password there, and then we will give it rights that it needs to do some other stuff. Well, this is the same thing as an administrator account, only not quite, because we're still having to connect to these remote machines. We're still probably using WMI, and the only account that has rights to remote into WMI is an administrator account on that local machine. So we begin to start running into problems. And how do I schedule my script across the network? Well, one of the things that I used to do is I would set up what I called a management server on the network. And on this management server is where I would store all of my scripts, and I would create my scheduled tasks on this machine. I would make sure that it had the rights to do stuff, and it's still fanning out and trying to do things. But then, how do I get the log results back that lets me know that my script ran properly on all these other machines? Dude, now you're really starting to get complicated. Well, one of the things that I did was I would write the results from the script into a text file. I would drop the text file into a folder on the remote machine, of course, and then I would have System Center go off and collect these text files, bring them back in so that I could try to do some kind of a report. Dude. yeah. I see you laughing. Some of you may have had that same idea, and it works, sort of. It's embarrassing. I mean, you don't want your friends to see you doing this stuff. But so there's lots of problems. And it always seems nice when I have this powerful solution, but then when I try to think about how to use this powerful solution in real life, the details get quite complicated. So this is where we need to take a step back and figure out how can we do PowerShell as a service. And the same thing also occurs with desired state configuration. Desired state configuration is actually pretty cool. Most of the time when I see an example of desired state configuration, it's somebody running it on their laptop against a couple of virtual machines. That doesn't replicate real-life networking very much. It's one thing to run DSC, in a couple of virtual machines on my laptop. It's another to try to scale up in a dynamic environment and be able to access thousands of machines. And this is exactly the problem. I've got thousands of servers that are running services. These services are all quite complicated, and I must try to figure out a way to configure these things. In reality, we don't even really care about servers anymore. Instead, we are thinking about applications. Okay? So, for example, if I've got Exchange, and I've got a large company spread out around the world, I may very easily have 40 or 50 or more Exchange servers spread out all around the world. And I may go and write some scripts, and I check the uptime on every single one of my 50 servers around the world. And the uptime on each individual server around the world is 99%. Not bad. Okay? Not perfect, not great, but not bad. I mean, 99% uptime translates to, less 10 minutes or so downtime a year, roughly. Maybe a little more. But that's not bad. And it's not perfect, like I said, but I'm just being. But now think about this. If each server was down for 10 minutes in the whole year, but they were not down at exactly the same time, and this is why I said 10 minutes, because it's easy to multiply, then that means that I could have part of my Exchange infrastructure down for 500 minutes in the year. If I was real unfortunate and each server was down at a different time. So I've got 10 times 50. Now, if you have an Exchange, infrastructure, and you have a downtime that is approaching 500 minutes, dude, your users are not going to be very happy. But I look at each individual machine, and it was okay. I mean, it wasn't bad, wasn't great, but it wasn't bad. But so this is where the things start to look. So we don't care about individual servers. What we are actually caring about is this application that it is being provided. Email, calendaring, messaging, what have you. Now, I was speaking at a user group in Tampa, Florida, and I actually told this story, I think, during my keynote at System Center Universe. So, you guys, sorry for the repeat here. But it's a pretty cool story. So this guy was telling me that the executives at his company had decided that they were going to give away free pizza for one day. And on this day, they were advertising it during an American football game. Okay, so and come to find out, that Americans like free pizza even more than they do American football. Yeah, but luckily they had told them ahead of time that they were going to do this. And also luckily, their website portal and stuff was actually hosted in Azure. And so they were able to do some testing before the day that they were going to give away the free pizza. And what they found, and it's really good they did the testing, what they found is that when they put a heavy load on the server, that if the machine capacity got to 50%, they had to start adding additional servers to handle the load. That if they had used the defaults, which was like, you get to 90% capacity and try to add more servers, they could not get them online fast enough with their application to scale to meet the demand. And so instead, what was happening in their early testing, was that so they try adding more servers, but the more connections keep coming in, and they could never catch up, and so eventually the whole thing just crashed and died. So they kept falling back, to see, okay, we need to get these machines to come up to speed as fast as possible, and B, we need to back up to the point to where we can start bringing them online fast enough to handle the increased capacity. And then once they had brought all of this huge extra capacity on, then after the football game was over and the advertisements were no longer running, then they needed to bring it back down. So again, it was the application that they were looking at, where people was signing in, getting the free coupon to go and get the free pizza, as opposed to, IIS, or this one particular website or what have you. Okay, so how did they bring these machines on? Well, they were using desired state configuration, as they were bringing these things on, because they did not build, 10,000 virtual machines and have them all sitting there, waiting. They spun them up as the need was, and then they spun them down when the need was no longer there. And you don't have time to have some guy, go click, click, next, next, next. You could have 10,000 people going click, click, next, 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 and maybe never catch up. So this is a whole new world, and what we see, is that by the way that we approach these technical considerations, then that gives us the ability to be able to do things that our companies never thought that we could do before. In the past, this company would have never, have been able to have offered free pizza during a football game, because they could not have afforded to build up the number of servers that would be required to handle this domain. And if they could have afforded to build up the number of servers, they certainly could not afford to build a whole new data center to hold all of those servers. Not for, one to give away free pizza during one football game. You can't do that. But now we can. And so they were able to look at what the cost was going to be and how much extra traffic they were going to do, and how this would tie in with their marketing that they had created a new recipe for pizza, and inviting people to try it, and hopefully, it worked out and they made the return on their investment and everybody's happy. So this is one of the problems, that we may run into something like this. So when we are configuring our servers, now what we are looking at are roles. And these roles sometimes correspond to infrastructure, other times they correspond to, applications or something. What they do not necessarily correspond to anymore, is, Windows Server 2012 R2, Windows Server 2008 R2, set up like this or that or the other. So, and we need to, like I said, we need to be able to scale to grow quickly or to shrink quickly as we need to do. Now, these servers that are in different roles, we like to have them configured in the same way for all of the other roles in which they are participating in. And so all of my file servers, for instance, if I've got still have file servers, I want these to be set up one way. My print servers another way. My domain controller set up an additional way. This is thinking in traditional terms. But then also we may need to have access to different virtual machines. We may need to have different roles, different configurations, different teams may own some of these pieces. And we've seen this even back, since I first started in consulting many years ago, as that I would, the networking or the infrastructure team, they would set up and configure Windows. And then the database team, or the SQL team, they would come in and set up and configure SQL, the DBA. And then the developers, they would come in and install their application on the SQL server. And so you've got at least 3, different teams that own a piece of this one machine. But what you wound up in, the security became a problem. Monitoring application became a problem. Troubleshooting became a problem. Who's to say that some person who was over here, working with his application, it wasn't working, so he goes in and just adds, domain admins, gives everybody rights to everything. Hey, my application started working again. Great, I'm happy. But then you've got other people who are maybe not going to be so happy. So what we see then, is that we've got to be able to handle this. So we've got the integration of the pieces that we need to be. We want to be flexible and yet also be reliable. And of course, all of this is going to get to the point to where we are reducing the cost and improving, our productivity. There was at System Center Universe, there was a Microsoft PFE, and he had created something that was actually really cool. He was using Power BI, and how many of you have used Power BI? Just a couple of you. It's really cool. It lets you do reports and pretty charts and graphics, and you can tie in with different sources of data. Obviously, you can tie in. OMS can export the data to Power BI now. But anyway, he had created a Power BI worksheet, and what he did is he had categorized his different run books from Azure Automation. One of the other things that he had added was how long it took them to develop that particular run book. And then the next thing that he had done is he was tracking how often this run book ran, and did these certain configuration changes. And so the whole point of his Power BI then was so he could show management that we did this investment in automation, and within so many weeks or months or whatever, we recouped the investment of time that we had in developing these run books, and so now everything else is, basically for free, or a profit, whatever. So I thought it was actually, a very interesting approach to be able to track, his scripts, his PowerShell scripts, in such a way that he could see, this is how long we spent developing them, this is how long we have used them, and this is all the money that we are saving because of these. Doing something that with just a script, would be hard, but since you're collecting that automation data into OMS, it was actually pretty easy. So Operations Management Suite, I've mentioned these. So, we've got automation, we've got analytics, we've got, backup recovery, and security. Those are your main 4 areas. And in those, we have other stuff. And we're constantly, releasing new information. So if I want to find, the status of all of my security updates across all of my infrastructure, I could do that. If I want to find out, security issues, failed logins, I wrote a very simple run book the other day because I had the idea I wanted to see how many times people are logging on as admin, root, or administrator, across the entire, infrastructure, and it was quite shocking and revealing. Because I didn't think that anybody nowadays still logged on as admin or administrator or root, but evidently they do, which I thought we'd learned that lesson a long time ago. So this is something that you can do. Now, the problem is that if somebody's logging on as administrator, how do you know who they are? That's kind of the problem. It takes some work, maybe. You can. One of the things we have is we have an IP address, that is tracked in the log. So if it's just somebody, that's doing this, so we could possibly go back and find the IP address. Obviously we can. And if it's handed out from DHCP, maybe we can go back and we can look and see, which machine MAC address it's registered to. Then we can go back in and search the MAC address and find the machine name, and then maybe find out who owns that machine, and then go show up at their desk and say, why are you logging on as admin? Perhaps, that might work. Well, in OMS, I could track that information very quickly, and I could actually put that information into a report, because DHCP produces logs, which we can pick up now, as and NetBIOS registrations and all that stuff too. So PowerShell as a service, PowerShell++, if you will. So we have run books. Now, a run book is not anything complicated. So we use the term run book. When I think of run book, basically I'm thinking a PowerShell script. Okay, that we are running in automation. Now, it's called a run book because it consists of many different things. It may consist of a connection. So we have an Azure Run As connection that we have created, and so that connection is associated with the script. We also have a schedule that may be executing that script, and so the schedule is going to be associated with the script. We could have variables, certificates, all of the different pieces that you may have created that help your script to run. That package that have everything that's associated with, we call it a run book. Now we can create run books using a graphical interface. You can drag and drop pieces and stuff, kind of like you might you might do in other programs. Personally, I've never done that. It's easier for me just to write the PowerShell code and be done with it. We have one of the things that we have is a centralized store, and this centralized store is where we store our credential objects, our certificates. We can store variables there. We can store modules, DAC resources. We can store schedules, a centralized scheduler for the whole network. We also have some rudimentary change control built in. So When I create a new runbook and then I publish it, then a flag gets set as published. And it can now run wherever I want it to. If I click on this thing to open it, then we change that flag to edit. Now I can still run it, with the edit flag there. But if I run it and I don't like it, then I can revert back to my originally published version. So by doing this, I always have my canonical version, my published version. I have an edited version that I may be working on changing or not, and I can move between the two. If I like my edited version, then I publish it, and then it now becomes the published version, the canonical version of the script. So it's kind of rudimentary, but it works. And I know that myself, a lot of times when I was using like the ISE, the PowerShell Integrated Script Environment, as I edit a script, then when I get ready to run, what does it do?
Save.
It does save it, and then it executes it, right? Initially it warns you. It says, we're going to save this. Do you want to overwrite your script? And you say, I don't know, and then eventually you just say, quit bugging me, and so then it doesn't prompt anymore. But it always saves. So that means that you can screw up a perfectly good script, by introducing an error when you were trying to maybe add some extra functionality to it. And we don't have a backup automatically of the script. Just as an aside, if you will, I wrote a plugin, for my ISE that would always save my script to a temporary copy of the script. Just using a temporary name, so that I would always have it there. And then if it didn't work, I could go to my temp folder, get the latest version of the script, rename it PS1, delete the original. Or another thing you can do is if you turn on the previous versions feature in Windows on the file system, then you will have a backup copy of your script. And that's really easy. If you totally mess up your script, you can go back to restore previous versions and restore your previous version of the script. So that's a couple things that might help. One of the things that we've added in that I will show you to give me better version and control than just my current version and the one I'm working on is we also integrate with GitHub. And so I'll show you that if you haven't played with that. So we have this execution environment that allows me to execute PowerShell across my environment. We automatically set up a pool server. Now, those of you who have used the desired state configuration, has anybody successfully set up a PowerShell pool server? Oh, wow. Okay, good. Congratulations. It's very complicated to get it set up properly. Our step-by-step easy guide is like 30 pages long. And it can be very hard and frustrating to set it up properly. With Azure Automation, we automatically set up a pool server, and when we register our DSC clients, they automatically connect and pull down their configuration. So it is completely automatic, and it works well. We also have some APIs that are there. We give the historical analysis, so I can automatically see when my runbooks have ran, if they were successful or not. If I've got them on a schedule, I can see the scheduler. And this is actually really nice because I can go in and look at a machine basis, and see every script that ran on that server and when they ran. Then I can click and I can see the actual script itself that ran. And so this makes troubleshooting quite nice, you know, if somebody's script had made a mess. There's not any installation, you know, nothing that has to be done. This infrastructure will automatically exist when I have OMS. Now we give we have a free level of operations management suite, and the link for that is aka.ms. So that's our Microsoft's kind of bit.ly service, you know, and then it is get OMS, GET-OMS. I'll show that to you on a slide later on, but this gives you a free level. You can do automation for 5 machines. You can store 500 megabytes of data per day, up to for 7 days from a historical perspective, and it is free. You know, right now it's intended that that level would be free forever. You know, however forever is, and this is really nice. You know, because you set up some runbooks, you're testing it, you're running it, and then if you like it, you just simply add more machines, you know, to your service. So it would be your same service. You know, so this is not like a separate demo environment that lasts for 30 days and then everything goes away. You know, all the stuff that you've done just delete it or whatever. You know, this level is going to be there, and you can just continue to build on it. We do have a demo that you can connect to, and it's from that same link. And it has a pre-configured environment and has a lab book, and you can work through the environment and the lab book, you know, so that you can get an idea, you know, about what it does. And I would recommend that you use that before you set up your trial version. So, and this does scale. There's new features that are added, like I said, sometimes almost weekly. We give you we let you know what is going to be added, because you will see things that show up and they say preview feature. And so stuff will be in a preview feature, you know, for a while. And so that's your roadmap. And then we will say coming soon, which is stuff that is not yet in preview. So you automatically know what is going to be released, you know, with the preview feature, yeah, and then you also know what is going to be released after that because it's coming soon. And so this works. So with this, we have a runbook gallery, which I will show you. And this is this means that I do not have to write all of the code myself. I can go and browse the runbook gallery, find something that sounds like it might do what I want, open it up, look at the code, see if I like the code, look and see who wrote it, see if I know who that person is or not. And then if I like all of that, then I can import it into my environment, and then I can edit it, change it if I wish. Same thing with modules on this. We have PowerShell essentially 5.1 support. So PowerShell 5.1 is on Windows 10 Anniversary Edition, and so you could target that if you were managing or working with those machines. Otherwise, you know, PowerShell 5. We have an ISE add-on that allows you to continue to use the PowerShell ISE, but it gives you a lot of stuff so that I can see what the runbooks are, what the modules are. I can see my automation accounts, and I can edit using the ISE environment. I will show that to you. Hybrid worker means that we have stuff in the cloud and we have stuff on premises, and we can work with those. Analytics, diagnostic logs, and all of the other stuff. So let me show you the runbook gallery. So the first thing I do is I log on to Microsoft Azure, and once I'm doing that, then I go into my automation account. This is Tricia's automation account. I click on Assets, and then I can go to Runbooks. And then from the runbook, then I could import a runbook or edit one, or I can browse the gallery. When I click on Browse Gallery, I have two choices. I have the Script Center, which is the scripting guide script repository that we set up, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago. And then we have the PowerShell Gallery, which the PowerShell team created and just basically went live a few months ago. It was in preview for a very long time. So I'm going to choose the PowerShell Gallery, and we've added the ability to store scripts in the PowerShell Galleries, which will be the basis of your Azure Automation runbook. Before that, it was originally just going to be for modules. So I can scroll through this, I can look at the script name, I can see a short description, and I can see who created the actual runbook. When I click on it, then it opens up another pane, so it has the name of the script, and I can scroll through this and take a look at it. Scroll over there. We can see that this has a lot of comments, which is what all that green stuff at the top is. And it's been downloaded 128 times since November of last year. It resides on GitHub. The PowerShell Gallery is a special view of the GitHub. And there's more descriptions on it and stuff. So I haven't really got to any code actually yet. And so we can see that the comment block is past that. Then they have parameters, and then they're describing that. Still more comments describing each of the parameters. We have our example. Keep on going, and now we finally get to the actual code itself. This is a PowerShell workflow called Connect-Azure VM. We see the example that we're going to need a subscription name, a service name, the VM name, and then credentials to log on. We see each of those parameters. We see that it uses add Azure account, has an inline script that uses get Azure VM, and those parameters that I gave it, and selects the information. Then it tests to see if there's a local certificate on it, writes progress, and goes through there. So I decide I want to play with this a little bit, so I click import. It automatically copies down the name of the runbook, and then I could just say import it, and it will bring it back over into my assets as a over to there. So once it's brought into my assets, then we can take a look at it, and I can say edit. This time the edit will open up into the editor that we have for Azure Automation. Basically, this particular editor is equivalent pretty much to Notepad. Gives you a little bit of coloring, but it doesn't have tab completion or IntelliSense or any of that kind of stuff. It kind of looks like it might have tab completion or IntelliSense, but it really does not. That's why we created the PowerShell ISE add-on. So I close all of this out and just kind of keep working my way back through. Now I want to show you that we have, this is our GitHub repository, and so I always like to sync it whenever I add scripts, into my environment. So it creates a job, and then it'll go off and it'll synchronize it with GitHub. Okay, so how do I import a module from the PowerShell Gallery? Well, this is essentially the same thing. So I go over, this time I go over to modules, or go to my assets. Once I go to assets, then I click on modules. And then modules, I could add a module from my local machine, or I can browse the gallery. This time it does not give me the option of browsing the scripting guide script repository. It goes directly to the PowerShell Gallery. because it was optimized and designed specifically to do modules. And so I can do a partial search, say XWeb, and for instance, and then this brings up the XWeb administration module. I can see the resources that it exposes. This is actually pretty nice. So I see each of the different resources exposed by this module. If I tried to do this using PowerShell code, this is actually a little complicated to see all of the resources that get exposed by a module. And so I say import, and it imports it. I say groovy, and it will go back, starts a job, brings it back into the gallery. And then it's going to take a while it extracts the activities. To be honest, I'm not sure exactly what activities it's actually extracting, but it thinks it's doing something. The PowerShell ISE add-on is actually pretty cool, and so I'll show you an example of using that. So the first thing I do is I install it from the PowerShell gallery. So I use find module, Azure Automation toolkit, then I install the module. Then after that, then it's there, so then I can import it. Do not add this module to your PowerShell profile. It will really slow things down because you have to make this connection into Azure, and then it's a web service and it has to bring down resources and all of that. It will really slow things down, and so you don't want to do this. I wrote an article about this on the OMS team blog, and somebody put a comment, thanks for screwing up my ISE. I was like, dude, it's the same thing as like trying to add in the Active Directory module into your profile. That takes a while to go off and create that 80 drive and make those connections and stuff. So once I've installed the module and loaded it, then we can see that, so I'm logged on, and I have different automation accounts. And so there's a Mr. Ed account and a Teresa account. So I'm going to go connect to the Teresa automation account. And the little gears spin a little bit, and then it changes the directory. Now this is actually pretty cool because it truncates the location, and it just says like Teresa. So I can see my assets that I have. I've got credential objects and scripting wife, and there's a traditional. There's connection objects. There's the Azure Run As connection. We have variables and certificates. So all four different assets are listed and are available inside my ISE here. What we do is we create a local cache for your runbooks. And so this is in your user profile as automation workspace. And then it goes on from there to Visual Studio Enterprise. It has the GUID, then the resource group, and then your username or the automation account itself. All of that is part of your. And then when we load things, then we download them. So I can see these are my run books, and some of them are in edit, some of them are new, some of them are published. So then once I select one of these run books, then I have to download it. So I'm going to select the script that I wrote, Test Security Principal Logon. So I say download. This will download this into my local cache on my local machine. But that's all it does. Next, I have to open it. So once I click open, then that would open it up into the ISE. The reason we don't open it automatically is because you might have something that was there on one of the panes, and we don't want to change the focus, when you do this. So I download, and then I open, then I can edit it, then I can upload my draft and test the draft, and then eventually publish it. So I get automation connection, and I'm using the Azure Run As connection. I add my RM account, and then I do the service principal, the connection ID, application ID, the certificate, and I pick all of that up from the variable that is holding the Azure Run As connection object. So this code is completely neutral. I do not have anything hard-coded in this. anybody can use this code to make the connection into Azure and to be able to do something. When I say test, test the draft, it comes up with output quite often. It could be confusing. So the first thing I want to do is look, is remember that I need to see that, when this job was created, and it may have been a long time ago. The first time I was using this, it actually kind of faked me out several times because, I was changing stuff and I open it up and I'm still seeing the same errors. Well, it's like, man. And also I was thinking, this thing runs fast too. It doesn't run fast. And the errors that you see may have been created a long time ago. So once you open it up, then you have to actually click Start New Job. At that point, then it will go off and create a whole new job. It clears the output. And like I said, it may take a while. The first time I run a particular job, it's going to take longer than the second, third, or fourth time I run it in the same session. The reason is that we create a sandboxed PowerShell environment up in the cloud so that we can run your test script or your test configuration. And so that building that sandboxed environment takes a little while. And then once you do that, then when you run it a second or third or fourth time, it'll actually run a little bit faster. So this just simply shows that just brings back some environments, and so that shows me, that my connection into this works. So source control. So we set up. I showed you that we synchronized. We set up with GitHub. It's actually pretty simple. I need a GitHub account, so I go to github.com, type in a username, and if the username is unique and your email address is good, then you set your password. It'll just work just fine, and it'll set it up. Otherwise, it'll come back and say you need a different username or a different password or something else. So sign up. Your unlimited public repositories are free. So this means anybody can see your stuff if you don't mind. If you want to pay for a private repository, then people will not see your stuff. So I need to create a project. That's pretty simple. I click on Start Project, and then it go over. And once I start the project, I specify my repository. So you got the owner. It's nice to make a repository name that makes sense, like Azure Automation, sources or something, or source control. Type in a description. I like to have a description for all of my projects. And then you can make it public-private. Once you do this, then it create the repository, and it goes off and creates the repository. And then it shows, brings up to this, and it shows you some code that you could use if you wanted to do that. The next thing we need to do is to tie the repository that we created in with the automation source control. And so I go back to my automation account, and I say set up source control. At this point, we choose the source. The only source we can choose is GitHub. Eventually, we're going to tie it in with Visual Source Control Online, but right now we cannot. So I click Authorize. It goes off and authorizes it. It takes a little while. Then after it does that, then we need to say OK. This is like a really manual step-by-step process. So choose my repository, which is my source control repository. Nothing comes back when I do that. So then I select my branch. Again, nothing comes back. And so then I specify my root folder. This could just be a /. And now I have to say OK, and then OK. And then at this point, it will go off and line everything up. And we may want to go back to our GitHub to check and see if we actually got it authorized. So we can see that there's my repository, which is Azure Automation, and just doesn't have anything in it right now. So now I want to go to my settings. And once I go to my settings, then I can check the authorized applications, and I can see that it is Azure source control. And so that lets me know that it is in fact authorized, and so now I can use it. There are some downsides to just using runbooks. And if I've got configuration, then one of those downsides is that I have to write test, set, and report logic. I was actually looking at a script today that came from somebody on the team, and essentially what they were wanting to do is to configure, the firewall, some firewall settings, and it was pretty complicated. I mean, the script was pretty long. I had to spend a lot of time looking at it this morning, but basically he was testing to see if the firewall setting is there. If the firewall setting was not there, then he was going off and setting the firewall, and then he was reporting it. Okay? Test, set, report. Yeah, that's kind of what made the script a little complicated. Now, there is a firewall desired state configuration provider, a DSC resource provider. And by doing that, so that's what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite this thing as a DSC, and then I do not have to test, set, and report. All I do is I just make declarative statements, that I want this port to be open, this port to be closed, this protocol to be enabled, and so forth and so on. And so it becomes very straightforward and easy to read. It's not all of this if not, bang, whatever, try, catch, finally, and all of this stuff that gets really pretty complicated. In addition, if I'm actually using DSC runbooks, then I've got to make sure that I've got inbound ports on my machines that are open, so that I can make my connection. I've got to give the automation inbound access to the machines that are going to be there. And like I said, it's not really easy to read through a 100-line script when it's all this try, catch, finally, and all of the stuff that's trying to make these configurations. And the problem, basically, in technical terms, is that I'm writing imperative PowerShell when really I should be writing declarative PowerShell. So I want to say what I wish my environment to look like, instead of having to go through and physically trying to make the environment look like that. So let's take a look at PowerShell desired state configuration. So it does simplify the configuration. It prevents configuration drift. And what this is so I was giving the example earlier, about the SQL, application owner, and their application wasn't working. So because the machine hadn't been properly set up to begin with, they had admin rights on the box, and so they went in and gave the administrator full control over their folder, where their application resided. Once that worked, then they were fine. Well, that's a configuration drift. The machine shouldn't have been sent that way. So if we went into security issues later on, because somebody gave this web app admin control over the machine, or worse yet, domain admin rights, then yeah, we really got a problem. And so how do we fix that? Well, if you got this web app is replicated across 100 or 1,000 machines, but only one of them is set up wrong, you've got a really, really big problem. I've actually seen issues with this back when I was in consulting, when we were doing DNS round robin for load balancing way back when. And so you would only have a problem every once in a while. Yeah, those are fun to troubleshoot, particularly at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. So with desired state configuration, that no longer becomes an issue, because I have declared what I want my environment to look like. And if something happens that's wrong, on one of these 1,000 machines, all I do is refresh the DSC configuration. I can push it back out, and then boom, it just fixes itself. And because we can declare lots of stuff, files, we can environmental variables, registry keys, services, all kinds of things. And there's like a dozen DSC resource providers which are in the box, but then there are hundreds, that are available on the PowerShell gallery because the PowerShell team has been writing additional ones. So, for instance, that firewall, provider that I was telling you about, that doesn't ship with Windows. It's not on the box, but I can find it on the PowerShell gallery. I was looking for one that would allow me to set access control list, ACLs, and I found a nice security module up there. And so there's lots and lots of. I was looking for another one the other day that would allow me to configure auditing, on my machine. And there was a project that's on GitHub, where a lot of people have been working for the last 7 months, creating a desired state configuration resource, provider that would allow me to declare that I want auditing on this or this or this. And traditionally, we use group policy to do those kinds of things. Well, group policy is a lot of fun and everything, but sometimes I think that PowerShell is easier to do, particularly if a different team happens to own group policy. So we specify an intent. So I've got this environmental configuration. So I've got these variables, blah, blah, blah. And then what we have showing up here, website IIS, this is the name of the configuration. The website is the resource provider. And then I ensure that the website is present, that it has this name, and that it has this path. And then at this point, we just say make it so. And we can run through using a workflow, install the features, make sure that they're all there. So the nice thing about this is that with a desired state configuration, it makes a change once. And then the next time we run that same DSC configuration, it'll look and see if anything has changed. If it hadn't, it just quickly exits out, and no need to make a change. What we find sometimes in regular PowerShell is that I run a script once, it makes changes. I run it again, and it may make additional changes. I run it again, and it changes a third time. A silly example of this is I copy using File Explorer. I'll copy a file over, I get the file. I'll copy it over again, now I get the file parentheses 1. Again, file parentheses 2, and so forth and so on. It keeps copying files until I filled up my hard drive. And I'm still looking and wondering when the first file got copied over because I didn't hit refresh on my drive. So those could be challenges. With DSC, we do this test set report, and it's built right in. And the code itself is very simple. This here is some code, is DSC code. So we use the configuration keyword, specify a name, use lots of curly brackets. Here we specified the node that we want this to actually run on. The feature is IIS. We want it to ensure equals present, so we want it to be there. And the name of the feature is web-server. Then we've got ASP.4.5, Windows feature, ASP, ensure it's present, and then this is the name that you would get back if you type get Windows feature. So this is the actual name right there. So what happens then with desired state configuration is we write this as a PS1 file, a regular PowerShell script, but now we have to compile it. Okay, so once I have compiled it, Then it turns from a PS1 file. Well, the PS1 file will still be there, of course, but now we're going to have an MOF file, .mof. Now, in this case, I have one node. The node is the computer, the server that we want the configuration to apply to. So I have one configuration file, and I will have one MOF file for this this node. And then this one MOF file will have to be copied or pushed to this one server over here named, web service. That's fine if I have a single machine. But if I have 1,000 machines, then I've got 1,000 MOF files that I have to keep track of, and then I've got to make sure get out to these nodes somehow or other. In addition, so I'm going to probably put these on like a file share or something. If somebody makes changes to these, I'm going to have auditing enabled, to be able to see, if somebody made a change to it, but I won't necessarily know what was changed. I can check some of these and know that something changed, but I won't know what. And if I'm not auditing that share, then I won't even know who, except that all of a sudden something quits working. So this is a desire state configuration that I wrote. This shows up in the ISE, like I said. So specify these names, and so what I'm doing is I import the resource here as desired state configuration. I've got my node listed, and then the service is the bit service. I want to be set to automatic. I want it to be running and use local system. The browser service I want to be disabled. I want it to be stopped. Local system still there. DHCP I want to be automatic and running and using local system. Now the way that I compile this is I say I call this name set services, specify the output path, and this is my file share or if you will, or the folder, and then it will go on and it will create a MOF file with this name for this machine in this particular folder. At that point, I'm going to need to put it somewhere else to make sure that my server has access to this configuration. Okay, it actually works pretty good, but you may have a whole bunch of configuration files. You're going to have a whole bunch of MOF files, that you're going to have to get to these different nodes. So this becomes a problem, when I go back to I've got like all these thousands of machines. That's why people go off and are buying third-party products to help them do desired state configuration. Because when you get at the enterprise level, this is really hard to make happen. Like I said, tracking the changes and compliance, orchestrating these machines so that we don't have any downtime, put these into maintenance windows or whatever, managing my reboots, tracking it, from a centralized perspective. What's my logging look like? Can I go in and look at something quickly and easily tell the status of all of the machines in my environment? We don't have those tools, built in like right out of the box. So with Azure Automation, desired state configuration, this was probably introduced maybe 4 or 5 or 6 months ago with OMS, with Azure Automation. So we can have physical machines, we can have virtual machines. They can be Windows. We also have DSC for Linux. So I can do desired state configuration on my Linux machines. This can actually be pretty cool when you start thinking about, okay, so I have this file resource provider. That means that I can ensure that a package or a CONF file, for configuring some service or something, stopping a service, after I've specified my configuration file, on this Linux box. This could really help me to manage that machine. So we have all of these things. I can import it, author it, compile it, see the versions, distribute it, report. This also makes it easy to bring on the new nodes, and this is what the example I was giving you, earlier. This is one of the ways that we bring these machines up very quickly make sure they're set up and configured exactly the way that I want them. So with this is everything up here in the cloud. Boom, drops down to those machines. The free tier allows me to manage 5 machines. And then after that, there's a basic tier that you would allow to go on and add in additional nodes and stuff. It features reliability. You can read them earlier. We can scale and all of that stuff. So all of these items are there: the run books, the jobs, the assets, credentials, connections, schedules, variables, certificates. All of that stuff is there. So let me show you an example of how to set, how I might go through and do a configuration. So I can see I do not have any DSC configurations. I don't have any node configurations. I don't have any nodes. So I can hit refresh. It doesn't matter. They don't exist. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in a DSC configuration. It's the one that I actually showed you a little earlier. I can go up and I say add a configuration. At this point, I can select my file, and it opens up onto my local machine. So I was worried originally, like, how do I get these files up into the cloud? It's very simple. I just select them, and it'll automatically bring it in for me. It automatically puts it in the proper place for me. It automatically knows where it needs to be. I don't need to know the path or anything. It puts it into blob storage, and it knows the configuration and the location. So I don't have to mess with it. So I select the thing. It's going to copy it up there. I give it a description. I say groovy. At this point, it's published. Pretty simple. I can look at it, but notice that there are no compilations. So now I need to compile this script. So the first thing, I uploaded my PS1 file, the script, and now I compile it into an MOF file. It is that compiled MOF file that is applied to the machines, not the scripts. I don't really need to know that, but I do know that I've got to compile that script, that thing. I also have an export, and I can delete it. So if I want to go back and see what the MOF file looked like or what the configuration looked like, I can export it. If I decide that I just didn't like it, then I can delete it and get rid of it. So now I have a DSC configuration. So now I want to onboard some nodes. There are no nodes there, so I can say add Azure VM. I could also add an on-premises machine if I wish. So I say add Azure VM. I could select the virtual machines. And once I select the virtual machines, it gives me a list of the ones that are in my environment. And it says that Linux VMs are not supported for onboarding into the portal, although they may appear in the list below. Classic VMs are not supported for directly importing either. So I go to my VM machines, and I select them, and then I say create. At this point, it's going to bring them in and onboard them. I could change the refresh value, the way that it handles reboots and stuff, by looking at that configuration area before. It creates a job to onboard the machines. It registers the VM extension automatically, the DSC VM extension. My Linux machine, I would need to install the DSC extensions manually. The V1 machines would be the same thing. I would need to install the VM machines, the VM resources. So the next thing I want to do is find my DSC resources. So I like to use PowerShell to do this stuff. So the first thing that I do is I actually I add the format enumeration. I set it to 20. And the reason I do that is so that when I look at stuff, I can see more of the details. If 20 doesn't work, you can add 100 or whatever. Otherwise, you'll only get like 7 or 8 items and then ... when you select stuff. So I use find module, which will go off to the PowerShell gallery, and then I'm going to look for a tag of DSC resource kit. All of the DSC resource kits, which have been created by the PowerShell team, use the DSC resource kit tag. I pipe it to where published greater than 30 days ago. So this is actually just kind of playing around. So I say the date time object, now, date, add days, minus 30. So that's an easy way of getting 30 days ago. I select the version name description, and then I create a synthetic property with the label of DSC resource, and then I say it includes DSC resource. So this will now show only the DSC resources which are contained in that resource kit object. Then I pipe it to out grid view. So I run the script, it goes off, it queries the PowerShell gallery, and pulls back all of the things that have a tag of DSC resource kit that were published in the last 30 days. So I see there's a new version of X Web Admin, DSC Web Service, Environment Group, X Networking. The X Networking actually is the one that has the firewall stuff in it. There's AD computers and domains, and computers and offline domain join, scheduling tests. There's a SQL module, some VHDs, DHCP, desired state diagnostics, Exchange, SQL, failover clustering, SharePoint, web admin, and so forth and so on. Remember I mentioned that we could do SNMP. Well, there's the CSNMP module down there. We could use that to configure and pick up some system traps if we wanted to, and to throw them into stuff. So the online services module is used to log on to Office online services and all of that. So those are all the new resource kit modules that have, or resource kit providers that have been created in the last 30 days. So when I begin to take a look at desired state configuration and runbooks, then you might have the question of, when do I use one as opposed to the other? And if you have that question, then I would suggest that perhaps that's the wrong question to even ask. Because it's not like one as opposed to the other. You know, that's like trying to say, do you like chocolate or do you like the little Haribo gummy bears better? You know, it's not an either or. You can like both, you know. Maybe chocolate covered gummy bears if you can figure out how to do it without melting them. It is the two things that work together. So there may be some things that I want to set up and configure from outside the virtual machine before it actually comes up. And to do that, then I can use the Azure RM and connect, or my Hyper-V stuff, and connect to the actual virtual environment and do some configuration stuff. I can use a regular PowerShell script to do that, or a runbook. And then once the machine comes up, then I use the desired state configuration to configure and to set up some stuff. Let me give you an example of how I did this using Hyper-V. So I ran a script, and what that script did is it would mount the VHD. And then I would copy some resource files that I needed inside of that VHD, you know, as well as some other configuration files. Then dismount that and then start the virtual machine up. As the machine started up, then it needed access to these particular files, you know, in order to go ahead and finish the configuration, to set the IP address, to specify the network adapter, you know, which one's going to be public, private, set the firewall configuration, and then bring it on up and then add in the features and all of the other stuff. I couldn't do that if I can't connect to the machine. So that's why I did the injection, you know, into the virtual machine before it brought up. We do the same thing with Azure, you know, so I can have my files, for instance, in storage, Azure storage, and then we can bring the stuff in that we want to as the environment comes up, becomes awake, becomes aware, and then we drive the configuration, of it. So so that's one way of using a runbook or a script to set up the environment, and then after it comes up, then we use the desired state configuration to configure the environment. In addition, there's lots of things that I need to do that I just need to run on an irregular basis. So, for instance, I may want to run a script that's going to, enable some accounts, disable some accounts, turn on some logging, turn off some logging. I can script performance counter collections, writing to event logs, exporting event logs, all these kinds of things that I don't need on a regular basis, but occasionally I want to do. Or maybe I've got a script that I run that's going to go off and update and install Windows updates. Okay, that's not something that I would use DSC for, and I certainly am not going to turn on automatic updates on my servers. So a script that would configure and go off and install the Windows updates, works fine. On my Linux machine, then I'm going to be using whichever version. If I'm using Ubuntu, then I'm going to go off to there and update my installed features from that. Again, that can be a single command, that would bring this stuff up. So we use desired state configuration to configure the machines, to set them up, to make sure that I've got files, registry keys, services, all this stuff configured properly. If I'm wanting to shut down my machines, for instance, and I want to shut them down in a particular order, then I can do a runbook as a workflow. And so I can specify that this one shuts down, and then when it's done, then I'm going to shut down the next one. When it's down, then I'm going to shut down the next one, and so forth. And so I can wait for an activity to do that. If I've got something that I'm wanting to do that's a complex thing, then using my workflow, then I can checkpoint at certain positions. And so that means that if the workflow fails or something happens, then it's not going to have to go back and rerun the whole thing, but we would only go back to the last checkpoint and continue forward. And so that's another reason that I might want to use a runbook, a script, or something like that. We have ARM templates, Azure Resource Manager templates. So I use PowerShell to declaratively configure my virtual machines and my physical hosts. I use the ARM templates to configure cloud resources, to configure virtual machines, networking, storage accounts, and all of that stuff. We can configure these VMs, and then after they're up and running, then now I use DSC to finish configuring them. That's actually the way that a lot of people declare their stuff. So they're not using the PowerShell scripts to configure the environment. They just simply use an ARM template. It brings it up to a certain level. Then I use desired state configuration to configure it based upon the role that I want that machine to play. If I want to bring on board Linux, there's a number of items that I need to have in order for desired state configuration to work on my Linux machines. These are listed here. There's an article on the OMS site, under DSC that talks about it. So basically, I need a C library. I need to have Python, OMI. I need OpenSSL, which is actually really cool because Microsoft has embraced a lot of this stuff. I need my Python C libraries, libcurl. I need an unzipper or something or other, and then I need this PowerShell DSC package, and I need the unzipper and all that stuff because I've got to, unzip it. Installing it, you can put all of this into a bash script if you want to. Go through there and pull down the stuff, get your downloads, do that. We also need an OMI server startup script, and there's an example of that you can do that. Once you do that, then we need to onboard the Linux machine into DSC, And the way that we do that is use register to onboard it. We need the primary key and the secondary key. So we just come over here, we call register, the automation, the URL, and your primary register key. And then at that point, then it will go ahead and put that Linux machine into that DSC node, DSC section that I showed you earlier. At that point, then I can use the, there's like 8 or 9 desired state configuration resources that comes with the DSC package, and then other people can write DSC providers for your Linux machines. This is going to become a lot easier since we have open sourced PowerShell, and that would allow you to do that. Some of the things that you need to be aware of, this is, like I said, this is more of a technical thing. You know, I'm configuring a MOF, I'm assigning a MOF file, not a PS1 file, to the node. So that means you've got to compile it. Now on my Linux machine, unfortunately, right now, we do not have the capability to compile that MOF file on the Linux machine. So that means that I take my configuration, you know, that I wrote for my Linux machine, and then I compile it on my local machine, or in the cloud, wherever, you know. But I have to get that MOF file for my Linux machine. Then at that point, then I'm going to need to copy that MOF file over to the Linux machine, and then when we apply the configuration, then that MOF file is there. This is something that we are looking to, that we are going to improve, you know, in the future, because OMI has the ability, or would have the ability to create the MOF compilation there. Then that's hopefully what we'll be able to do. I need machines with WMI5 installed on my Windows machine so they can communicate with Azure Automation. We don't support composite configurations or partial configurations. So that means that I have a single, you know, configuration file that's going to have all of my configuration items in it. We can't put together pieces of other configurations and all of that. The nodes have to be registered with Automation DSC, and then they've got to be re-registered every year because the certificate is only good for 1 year. If I compile the configurations that use credentials in Automation DSC, then we're going to have to pass in configuration data via the PowerShell commandlets. Configuration data is essentially like a huge, gigantic, you know, hash file. We use it for a lot of different things. For instance, credentials for user accounts and all that kind of stuff. So we've talked about Azure Automation, and we've looked at how I can do you know, heterogeneous management using PowerShell and DSC, and talked about how using the Azure Automation basically becomes PowerShell as a service. We have a central location to store all of my assets, and a central location to store the reports and the scripts and all of that. It's reliable, and scalable, and all of that. Now, we do have a monthly automation call. It's conducted by Eamon O'Reilly, who's one of our program managers that owns Azure Automation. And I don't know, you might like to join, although it might be pretty late at night for you when we have the call. But if you want to sign up for it, talk to Teresa. She'll collect your email address. We do not have a public sign up, so there's not like a meetup that you would sign up for. So right now it's more of a closed list. But talk to Teresa, give your email address, and then I will send it to Eamon, collect it on that. Once you do that, you'll also have access to the archives, you know, where the calls have been archived for. And if you never go to a live meeting, at least you'd have access to the SharePoint site. They are on hold right now. We're going to restart them right after Ignite, and the reason is because Ignite is a big deal, and there's announcements and all that kind of stuff, and at that point there would be a lot of stuff to talk about. The OMS team blog, I kind of mentioned it, aka.ms/OMS blog, and this past week we've had new stuff being mentioned every single day. So there's a lot of things that are going on. All of the new features are going to be here. I've also been asking various MVPs if they would like to contribute to the blog and to write some stuff. And this is where you go to get the free version of OMS. So again, it's aka.ms /get OMS, GET-OMS. And so if you see it in action, this is the pre-populated area with the lab manual. You can work through the exercises. It lasts for about an hour, and when you disconnect from it, it goes away. So if you didn't finish and you wanted to go back and connect again, then you would just click and sign up again, and then you could go back through it. You can sign up for a one-on-one demo and schedule it, and then somebody will connect with you and walk you through and show you the stuff. Your free account is right down there, and like I said, that works out pretty good. PowerShell open source. How many of you guys know about this? Almost everybody. So cool. What we did is we've open sourced PowerShell, and so essentially we have been growing and working on PowerShell. There's more than 3,000 commandlets now. It's a task-based scripting language. We got DSC, Pester, and all of that. So we've announced the availability of PowerShell, open source. It's on GitHub. These are the targeted versions of Linux that we're working on right now, or that are available right now. It is a single code base, and for Windows and for Linux. Now, this is PowerShell Core sitting on top of .NET Core, essentially. The repository is github.com/PowerShell/PowerShell. It uses the MIT license, and this is like a really early alpha stage. We're not sure exactly how this is all going to work. Certainly you could fork the project, take it, build it, and add your own stuff to it. That would be fine. We're looking at a way to where you may be able to check back, work out a way to check back in changes and have them look at it approved, and maybe even eventually merge it back in with the whole PowerShell altogether. When we talk about PowerShell, then essentially we're kind of talking about the open source PowerShell. When we talk about Windows PowerShell, then we're talking about the PowerShell that is on your Windows machine. So like I've got Windows PowerShell on this. It's 5.1 on my Windows 10 Anniversary Edition. So how all of that's going to work, we don't really know. So, but this is something that we've been wanting to do for a very long time. It's actually going to be pretty cool. This gives us the ability to do more heterogeneous management with Azure, AWS, VMware, Chef, OpenSSH, which is cool. So that could be a way to communicate and stuff. It's going to give you make a nice, easy way to wrap Linux binaries and stuff, to create templates for configuring Apache. We're going to try to work with getting other editors available, VS Code, Sublime, something like that. The neat thing is making this available to people that are using Linux, who have kind of seen PowerShell and they go, wow, that's really cool. I like passing objects and all this stuff. I wish I could make it work on my Linux machine. Now you can. We've got an awesome REST shell, and we do JSON very easily and all that stuff. So, and that is it. questions or anything? Yes.
A lot of DSC modules, resource files, there's X prompt.
Yes.
It's for experimental.
Yeah, sort of, yeah.
I haven't really got my toes wet yet, because when I looked on the list, so all the modules were on X.
Yeah, so there's a few modules that ship in the product. Then like everything else is like kind of like out there. So the PowerShell team has been going through and creating all of the X modules, if you will, for DSC resources, and they've been doing this because they wanted to get the ability to use DSC out there for the community. And so they put an X in front of it because they're the ones that are basically writing it. So like web administration, that's not created by the IIS team. It's created by the PowerShell team. And so they put an X in front of it in case the IIS team decides that they want to create their own DSC resource provider. Now, what these are doing is basically showing you this is an approach, or this is how that it could be done. And it might be that at some point in time, the IIS team looks at what the PowerShell team has done, and they say, that's good enough. Or, well, we would like to add a little bit of this or the other. And so the X in front of everything is a placeholder. And there's all of these notes and stuff on there that say, we recommend that you rename this from X to Y or Z or something, and then you go in and as you make changes to this, it's got a different name, rather than removing that X, and having it to be the same name as, say, the IIS team if they release a web admin DSC module, the logical name would already be taken, and so then they would be stuck giving it a really dumb name. So we didn't want to do that. You can kind of think about, so the best commandlet name for managing event logs is get event log, right? And so that was in PowerShell 1. When we added new capability to it in PowerShell 2, get event log, that name was already taken. And so they came up with this is being recorded, but a pretty dumb name, get when event. Which doesn't sound like it has anything to do with event logs whatsoever. If you've been doing automation and WMI for a long time, you think of an event as something that happens, like a logon event, or a disk full event. You don't think in terms of an event log. So that's why, they kind of like, if you will, learn from this, because get when event was actually made by a different team, that does logging and all this stuff. And it's a really, really cool commandlet, but like I said, get event log, that name was already taken. Now, certainly, they could have called it get event log, but dude. And the reason I say dude is because now you have to specify, when you have two commandlets with exactly the same name, you have to specify the fully qualified name, the module, that contains this and versioning and all this junk. I've got a Hey Scripting Guy blog article about it. And you really wouldn't want to do that. So I'd rather live with a dorky name, than to have to specify a commandlet name that's this long every time I wanted to peruse the event log. So that's why everything's named X. Now, from a supportability issue, you cannot pick up the phone and open a support case on one of these X modules. Oh, X files, right? but but the thing is, you can sit there and read them and look at them and all of this stuff. A lot of people are using these. Can you put them into production? I'd test it first, but a lot of people are using this stuff. Yeah, and like I said, they're more showing basic capability, and by putting these on GitHub, they are essentially kind of open sourcing these things, and I can give, and you'll notice that the revisions on these keep changing, more and more and more and more and more. I know some people, a couple of Microsoft PFEs that contributed to the Windows Uptime module, because it wasn't or DSC resource. It wasn't reporting, everything, and so Brian and Jason and some other people contributed to that project. It was actually pretty cool. At the last PowerShell Summit in Seattle, we had a DSC resource hackathon, where people from the PowerShell community, were contributing to these resource provider modules. So test them out and see. There's a lot of stuff there, and if it works, then go ahead and use it. We're really moving away from this release in the box, and we would not have as many resource providers. That's why they're creating the DSC resource resource kit. We wouldn't have near as many of those if we were having to wait for the standard Windows ship cycle. 5.1 coming out with Windows 10 Anniversary Edition, 5.0 coming out with Windows 10, 4.0, coming out with Windows 8.1, and so forth and so on, waiting every year, 18 months or something to release these resource providers, would be like really slow and, kind of kill, the environment. So it's a long answer to a short question. But I hope it helps. Anything else? Okay. Well, that's it. We will be around for a while. We'll talk and mingle.